Wait a minute, what day is it? Tomorrow I'm going to be a whole year older. So I'm going to be even older than Laura.
Oh, how old are you going to be tomorrow? Happy
37.
birthday.
I'm 37.
Welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's John T.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Malky.
And with us we have Paul Northup. Have I pronounced it right? Oh, I'm suddenly terrified that I've pronounced it incorrectly. I was trying to be posh and go Northup, but is it Northup?
Yeah, you've pronounced it entirely rightly, and thank you very much for that, because I spend my life with people mispronouncing my name or taking guesses at what it might be. So thank you very much, John T.
Excellent. And Paul, tell people what your current job is and what you've been doing for the last few weeks, and causing you the most stress.
So my current job is I'm the creative director at Greenbelt Festival. So I'm a member of a small team of people who work full-time. Yes, full-time. What do you do all year if you only have one festival? And we make a festival, which hasn't happened for the last 2 years, which is about to happen for the first time in 3 years. So yeah, for the last few weeks, I've been getting precious little sleep. I have been getting excited, if truth be told, but alongside that excitement comes a whole world of grief and anxiety. But I do it because it's a privilege.
The stress radiating off you, all the tiredness is, bless you for being with us. That's really, really kind of you. We all love Greenbelt, and we think it's amazing. And I think we've all at various times described it as, this is kind of, I guess, what heaven will be like, in a kind of, it's a very kind of kingdom of God kind of thing going with it as well. So if you're a listener and you've never been to Greenbelt, or you're not sure what it's about, then this is a privilege because Paul is the big dog there. And yeah, I'm assuming it's on your card, Big Dog Greenbelt Festival.
Yeah.
So before we get into it, I wanted to ask you, what are you guys drinking tonight? Paul, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a bottle of red. It's nothing special, because I tried to take our little dog for a walk. She's recently had an eye removed and she doesn't really like walking anymore. So I was heading for a supermarket or a shop where I would have had more choice than the one at which I ended up, because our dog doesn't really walk very well anymore. So I just had to go around to the corner shop, and I've got a bottle of Yellowtail Malbec.
Fantastic. This is good stuff.
I love a Yellowtail.
I'm not a wine swab.
I have to say, I'm a big fan of the Yellowtail Jammy Red Roux. It's my favorite. It's honestly one of my favorite wines. Jammy Red Roux. It's great. Yeah. It's got a glittery label. It's all you need.
But I noticed that you guys have got proper bottles of beer, and this is Beer Christianity. So I feel like I'm sort of letting you all down.
You're really not. We've had really Southern Baptists on here drinking kombucha and tea. It's really, I mean, the more shocking thing is that Southern Baptists were willing to come on our show. But that's and they were lovely. They were both lovely, actually. They were very nice. Also wine swabs. I feel like that's a new way for tasting, or kind of. Yeah. Malky, what you drinking?
I am on Adnam's Ghost Ship fake beer. Don't know if anyone else calls it fake beer, but I do in my house. Non-alcoholic. But yeah, it's pretty decent.
Nice. Lola?
I'm not drinking beer. I'm drinking cider. I'm drinking Henry Weston's. I know, yeah, easy. Chill out. I've only got one. It's Henry Weston's Cloudy Vintage, and this was bought as a gift from my mum and dad, because they know that Stowford Press is my favourite cider, and this is it's made by the same people. So Weston's make Stowford Press, that's their commercial brand. But this is their more local, smaller version of it. So it's very good. I would recommend.
I am drinking. So some friends of mine, James and Rebecca, bought me this while they were on the Isle of Man. It is Bushy's TT Premium Manx Ale. It's very nice. Yeah.
Is that TT as in Audi TT?
I think it's like that. The racing. I don't know if Audi TT is the same as the TT race, because that's motorbikes, isn't it?
That's a fun label.
By the way, did I just correct somebody on motorsport because I'm wearing this tone shirt and looking like a real boy?
Well played.
I have to say I couldn't tell you who was correct. So
yeah,
let's pretend.
Paul, Malky was pointing out earlier when we were talking about what we're going to be asking you tonight that you had, well, we wanted to know, we guessed that maybe you've been associated with Greenbelt for a really long time, and we were wondering where your connection to it started.
Oh, wow. So I first went to Greenbelt as an 18-year-old. Having grown up, like some of you on the podcast, in a Baptist church setting, village Baptist church, having been brought up by my grandparents, who were both Welsh Baptists. who took me to the local chapel. And I suddenly bowled up with my youth group at Greenbelt because someone had told us about it. And I would say that weekend transformed my life. And so I became a fan within the space of probably 30 minutes. And that fandom and that affection for the festival has remained with me. And yeah, I work for the festival now, and I'm very proud and privileged to do that. But I've been a fan, I've been a punter, I've been a performer, I've been a volunteer, I've been a trustee. Anything you can do for Greenbelt, I've wanted to do it, because ever since I bowled up there, I thought, this is it. This is the thing that I've sort of been waiting for. Now, that sounds very, very grandiose and pompous, but it's pretty genuine, I think. So 18 years old, as a very conflicted teenager who had kept his chapel life and his Jesus stuff very, very separate from his school academic stuff, particularly his love of literature and the arts. I didn't figure out how the two could go together, not in terms of the formation that I was experiencing as a teenager anyway. And when I got to Greenbelt, I thought, yes, it is possible. And so I converted at that stage.
That's awesome. And what is it that's so special about Greenbelt that you've wanted to dedicate so much time to it and to give so much to it? Because it's changed so much over the years from my understanding, and yet there seems to be something at its core. I don't know if that stays the same, but there's a spirit there somehow.
I think you're right, John T. There is a deceptively passionate and devoted spirit about it. And it's the spirit of devotion, I think, that above all, I think remains the same. I think that Greenbelt is very easily characterized as this sort of backslidden, anything goes liberal space that doesn't really believe anything anymore. I would really, really, really strongly refute that. I mean, it's not just because it's my job to do so, but I really would on a personal level. I've always found within the community that is Greenbelt, and I do call it my community as well as my work and the festival, which I love. I've always found people who are incredibly devoted in terms of their faith and its outworking, and in terms of their wanting to follow on after the person of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and in a way that I haven't found in many, if any, churches that I have belonged to over a good many years. Yeah, so I'm plunging straight in at the deep end, aren't I? Really, I'm shortcutting all the meanderings that you're probably wanting to have. But
no, we meander way too much. Please shortcut away.
But yeah, that I think, I as I said, I was conflicted. I couldn't work out how the seemingly two parts of my life belong together. Greenbelt helped solve that for me, and it helped me realize that if you are a Christian, if you want to be a Christian, any type of Christian, as Malky was saying, I am some sort of Christian, and I thought I was as an 18-year-old, and I realized, I can be some sort of Christian and hold all these things together and have a Christian worldview that thinks that you can find truth in a novel as well as truth in the Bible. And it's those sort of things. They sound so simple, almost facile to say out loud, but they really are important, and they're sort of foundational, and they've never left me. And that's why I love being involved in making it, because if there is just one or two, no, God, I'm going to sound like a preacher. If there's just one or two people who come this year who have a similar-ish sort of experience of integration, of belonging, then my work here is done. It would be nice if there were hundreds who had that experience, don't get me wrong.
And if they were paying.
Oh, yeah, and if they were paying for tickets, even better.
Well, Laura, I mean, you are going to go for the first time properly this year, but you came along a few years ago and experienced it, I think, for a day or for a bit. Is that right?
Yeah. I came me and a friend came for the day. We met you guys. I think that actually was the first time we met in person, Malky. I think that was Greenbelt 2019. There you go. And
that's correct.
Yeah, there you go. And we came for the day, and I'm very excited. This is my first time actually properly. I've got you can't see out of shot. I do have my tent in the background ready to go. I wanted to know though, what would you for first timers like me and other people who might be listening, what do you think their top hits should be for their first Greenbelt? What would you say?
Oh wow. I would say it's probably a mistake to over-plan and over-analyze the lineup for starters. I think that the biggest thing that you will experience as a first-timer, hopefully, is a sense of sort of welcome and freedom and belonging, that you can relax from pretty early on and be yourself. And I think that's quite important and crucial to having a good experience. What would I say? I would say, yeah, mooch, meander, relax, stumble upon things. Obviously, you know, go where the crowds are going, get drawn along if you want to be, but yeah, pick out your own path, do your own thing. I think that, you know, Greenbelt is not a worship and teaching conference. It's not programmatic in that sense. Doesn't have a compulsory strand of things that you sort of have to do, otherwise you feel like somewhat heretical or something. It's very much there, and it's deliberately presenting a smorgasbord of stuff for you. There are very frustrating and annoying choices at any one time, and I think the trick is to not get frustrated by that, but just to sort of think, well, I'm not missing out. I'm here. I'll just sort of dig into what's here. So I think, yeah, it sounds a bit cliched, but be in the moment, be free, and be yourself. And Greenbelt will sort of reveal itself to you, I think. Hopefully.
Is there work that you've had to do kind of intentionally to not accidentally become a worship and teaching festival? Like, is there a pressure to go that way? Or it feels like maybe that's what a lot of Christian conferences do, because maybe that's an easier path to go around. Is it kind of difficult to do that work?
That's a really good question, Malky. And I think, you know, our email inbox is from time to time full of that sort of questioning critique. But I think that this is going to sound slightly strange. I think that the emergence and the growth and the development of other big Christian event offerings since Greenbelt has been alive, Spring Harvest in the early days, and then sort of more recently things like New Wine and Soul Survivor and all of the other Christian events and festivals have been really, really helpful, because they do that sort of thing really, really well. So in a way, we can relax off the internal pressure or the external pressure that we might feel to do some of that stuff, which is completely valid and completely legitimate. And we can sort of relax and do something else, because those other Christian events aren't doing what we do, and we're not doing what they do. So am I answering your question? I would say that less and less over time has that been something that's required work or something that's been problematic for us. There have been stages in our lives, in the life of the festival, where that has been really deeply something that we've wrestled with. You know, how overtly worshipful and dogmatic, that's the wrong word, creedal should we be? But those questions are less pressing for us now. It's not that those things aren't important, but they sort of don't matter for us, because we're making something that isn't that. And I think we're quite relaxed and happy about that. But I'd be lying to say if that's always been the case.
And one of the other things that makes you different, I think, is the focus on justice in a quite fearless way. Because I think a lot of Christian events now do have a strand where they'll talk a little bit about social justice, and maybe it's always been that way, but it's in a very safe way. It's in a very anodyne way that would be very hard to disagree with. Whereas Greenbelt, I've always been impressed with the fact that there's a commitment to the struggle for Palestinian freedom and rights and justice. When you guys talk about poverty, you're talking about solutions to global poverty that are not just about, well, we should give more to charity. There's a courage in the church to be speaking out like that, even when a lot of Christian leaders may believe it. There's not necessarily safety to say it. Has that ever got you any? Well, A, does that resonate, and B, has it ever got you guys any trouble? That's a great question again. I think that I don't know if
I saw something in one of my feeds earlier on today, a Radio 4 program that Helen Lewis is doing on sort of like different facets of the church, or the way that the church has waned, and is it being replaced by different other social movements. And the title of it was The Church of Social Justice. And I think that there's a lot of different things to say there, Jonty. From our detractors would say that Greenbelt has replaced its commitment to Christianity and to following Jesus Christ and its commitment to the arts and its commitment to being an arts festival by just simply being a de facto social justice festival. And there's lots of those around. So what makes Greenbelt distinctive? And I do think that you're right, and you're very kind to say that we don't exactly pick the most straightforward of issues to bang on about. So the issue that causes me most public grief in terms of my email inbox and my having to answer to authorities is our championing of Palestinian human rights. We do that for lots of particular reasons, which we could dig into, but you've had Ilan Pape on your podcast, so I'm not going to cover it remotely as well as he will. And, in terms of climate change, you get eco congregations. That's great. Whoop. And you get churches that put solar panels on their roof. I've been on the phone today with Just Stop Oil, who want to bring like 20 people to the festival this year and basically take it over and declare a climate emergency. And so where I would argue, and we've got sessions with, we've had volunteers. Does it cause problems? Yes, it does. So, we've had, he won't mind me saying, but we had a wonderful, long-serving, really high-profile operational volunteer who left before the 2019 festival in protest about the fact that we were inviting Extinction Rebellion to have a presence at the festival. He was a serving police officer in his day job, and he could not, for the life of him, reconcile that the festival he loved and had served for decades, and I mean decades, would invite along this rebel-rousing, bunch of ne'er-do-wells who just made his life and the life of the public an absolute misery. And so that's one little example, but amplified, that is, it's problematic. It's not all that comfortable to attempt to spotlight the justice issues that we're going to spotlight. And because we're also attempting to be an inclusive and a safer space for people, every year we get, hijacked is the wrong word, but every year we get surprised by things that rear up and become massive. Hopefully they're not massively noticeable to festival goers and to Greenbelters, but behind the scenes, they're hugely vexed issues that we have to work through. This year, and people won't mind me saying this, and we're doing a whole bunch of stuff on site around this. The trans community in particular have been massively in our ears and in our eyes and in our hearts around some of the bookings that we've made, and we've had to do a lot of work and a lot of listening in order to try and be Christian and gracious and loving towards them. So it's difficult.
I can imagine, and I think that's something I have also enjoyed about Greenbelt has been, and I think it comes in waves, and some years it's more so than others, but that there is a quite broad church, that it's not a monolithic kind of set of beliefs that you have to sign up to feel comfortable there, that almost everyone can feel a little bit uncomfortable there, but safe. I think about the fact that, you've invited some people who have been described as TERFs by some activists, and although whether the RF of that is necessarily true. But for me, the most interesting one was Richard Dawkins this year, because he's a pretty conservative chap for a very progressive festival. And I was wondering what the thinking was behind that.
Was there a lot of thinking behind it?
He is also just a big name, which is a good enough reason to have him on the roster.
I mean, that's immediately where I was going to go first, Jonty. I was thinking, well, he's a name, he's not been before. He's got a lot of best-selling books out. Yeah. I mean, I guess that it's not necessarily, obviously, it's easy to caricature Richard Dawkins. He's not great on Twitter. We all know that. But he has done some groundbreaking scientific work with his biology and his evolutionary biology. I'm not a scientist, but there's no doubt that he is someone who is widely regarded as an incredible thinker in his time. He also, for those of us who hold a Christian faith or anyone who's religious in a serious way, he's also extremely pejorative and unhelpful and unkind. And so the thought of inviting him into a space that takes religion seriously, but also is very committed to engaging those religious commitments with the world in which we live, and the experiences with which we wrestle would be sort of fun in a way. That's not to suggest we want to just come in and we want to have him in to ridicule him. Not at all. We want to do him the honor that any human being is due. But we also want to say, hey, you know, that sort of that religious community, that Christian community particularly that you ridicule in your books, they're not here right now. So let's have a different sort of conversation where you have to be a little bit more grown up about your religious analysis. And so that's the reason, I think, for wanting to have him in, is saying, okay, look, let's leave behind all the caricatures and the Yahoo stuff and the culture wars that you deliberately set up because it's helpful to you because it sells you books and puts you at the head of the lead horseman in the new atheist movement. But let's put all that to one side. That audience isn't here. You know, that way of believing that you so violently object to is not represented here by and large. Although, yes, you're right, John T. We are a broad church. So let's have a different sort of conversation, one in which religious people can take science seriously, and religious people can actually respect some of what you're about. And object to other things that you're about, and let's have a conversation about it. Yeah, so that's why we invited him. We'll see how it goes. Who knows? It may turn out to be a very bad booking. It may turn out to be a very interesting one, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, obviously you're not going to find out until after the festival, you know, what that's going to be like. But do you often feel that you have to, like, I'm very actually impressed by that answer of, like, you know, I feel like it's very easy for us to be like, oh, it's like, Richard Dawkins, like, come on, guys, like, you know, this is the thing. But actually, I really appreciate your graciousness with that, and I think it's a really good reason to invite someone. But do you find with guests like that, and I assume probably there's been other similar characters in the past, that you maybe have to walk the line of, you know, offering that loving hand into a welcome into a community, but also the real possibility that they could do some real harm, that they could preach something that is false, that is unkind, that is just wrong, really? And, you know, have you ever had to walk that line before? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a worry. And particularly, you know, being completely honest with you, having Richard Dawkins about to come to the festival in just over a week's time, who knows what he's going to say? We've had to do a lot of work with him around the sort of conversation we want to have. We had to put up a short list of people who would be his in conversation. The first thing we said, we're not just going to give you a platform because we don't really want to promote you. You've already got, you know, you don't need any more promotion. You're doing fine. We want to have you in conversation, and we want to have you in conversation with someone who's sort of like, in a way, going to represent us as a community and stand for us. Yeah, that's fine, he said. Give me a short list. So I'm going to say this. I'm not the world's best scientist by any means. I'm not a scientist at all. And I haven't read all of his books, but I would have done if he'd have given me the gig. But I put myself on the short list because sometimes I think that Greenbelt has to put itself on the line. If we're going to invite someone, then I sort of need to put up myself and say, let's stand behind that decision and be the interviewer. I did that with Russell Brand, which we had a lot of skepticism around.
Which was wonderful.
Russell Brand was amazing. He was it was a good call.
That was
and not easy to handle.
To be fair.
Not easy to handle. Yeah, that was an experience. But anyway, he roundly rejected me because, of course, who am I? I haven't got any written credentials. I'm not a journalist. Blah blah blah. So anyway, presented him with a shortlist. He chose Giles Fraser on the basis of the fact that Giles is a professor of philosophy, apart from being a vicar, and teaches at Oxford, where he teaches. So, and I once had been at a formal dinner with him. So, but that's fine by me. That's fine by me because Giles will do a great job. So I've had really good conversations with Giles around the sort of conversations that we want to have. We're on totally the same page, and I'm really excited about it. And I think it'll hopefully work really well, and it'll be one of those Greenbelt moments. And I really hope for Richard that it will be an enjoyable experience, and one where he thinks, there was something that was different about that. That there was something that was not just the complete ogreish sort of like caricature of like the Jordan Peterson, Richard Dawkins, the big male beasts that like dominate this sort of like social media landscape, with undeservedly so, and that something more gentle and gracious can happen, which that's my hope. And I think that Giles will do a great job.
I think like Laura, I love that answer to it. And I think there's something of, not to sound too evangelical in a conversation that's, very Greenbelty, but like, it's a witness, hey? To be able to, I'm just going to picture talking to my friends who gave me the beer, who are not Christians or who have been hurt by the church. And there's something to say, yeah, it's a Christian festival. We're having Richard Dawkins come and talk, and it's not just to poke holes at him, it's to have a real conversation. There's something very there's something very Christian about that, actually. Although please don't invite Peterson, please.
I come under so much pressure to invite him every year, and the more I think I know about him and the more I read about him, the more I think that that would be a bad idea. But don't mistake the fact that there's a lot of people who want us to invite him to the festival.
Oh my word. I mean, genuine, like, Peterson fans also like Greenbelt.
Yeah.
I can't understand.
We're a broad church.
That's a very broad church.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think one of the things that I love about Greenbelt, and I loved when I first went, although I couldn't probably articulate it at the time, was the genuine inclusivity. And that feels like a buzzword now, but just the fact that it wasn't just a different kind of fundamentalism. It wasn't saying, you must be a liberal and you must tick these boxes and you mustn't believe these things. It was genuinely an open space for lots of different voices. So yeah, that's fascinating. And I think I'd be interested now, but I remember hearing a number of years ago that actually a lot of evangelicals, or even most folks that make up the attendance are evangelical, that they just appreciate that open space. They're not as stridently fearful, of different voices and different spaces. What's the makeup now? And yeah, how does that affect things?
Yeah. If you look at our post-festival survey, which is self-selecting, I mean, you have to be pretty serious to do a survey that's going to take you 10 minutes after you've been to a festival. I accept that. So it's a certain type of people doing it. But we are populated still, by and large, by a very, very devout and faithful church-going audience. People who are really thoroughly engaged in their local church. Many of whom would still, if not self-identify themselves, but still behave and believe as evangelicals. And that is absolutely fine. That is still our core audience. I think you're right to identify that, Malky, but they're a core audience who are, because they're so committed to this kingdom narrative, they are really, really open. And they don't experience this sort of challenge and provocation and inspiration and freedom and creativity in their church service. And it is a service. It's a service that they perform because it's part of what they think it means to be a good Christian. And suddenly, I think the reason that they love being at Greenbelt is not because it's going to necessarily change their mind and encourage them and persuade them to be suddenly liberal and move on from their infantile evangelical beliefs and get serious and be grown up and join the 21st century. I think it's because they think, wow, isn't this wonderful? I can just relax here a tad more. I can just be a little bit more open. I can almost feel like I'm a little bit naughty. It's almost like playing away in a sense, perhaps. It's giving people just different angles. And what they choose to do with those angles is very, very much up to them. But I'm always surprised, Malky, perhaps along with what you're suggesting, that how wonderfully pew-filling and church-going our audience continues to be. At the same time as the fact that we do provide a refuge for people who are refugees from the church. It's a really weird dynamic, but I think that speaks to your point about the fact that I hope we do hold an open space for all those people to feel welcome and included.
I love the idea of Greenbelt as a guilty pleasure for evangelicals. I think that's amazing. I was quite surprised when you were talking there. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, core of evangelicals and like pew filling. That doesn't, does that make sense to me about Greenbelt? And I'm like, but I love Greenbelt. I'm all about Greenbelt. And like, most of my career has been in the parachurch. We're all workers in the parachurch in this podcast. So of course there's a huge hunger for. Do you think that's? I know the kind of guilty pleasure thing is more a joke, but it sounds like maybe there's a space for an evangelicalism that is more confident and that is less threatened. Because I guess fundamentalism always comes from a place of fear and a feeling of being threatened. But is the core audience, or is there a growing kind of contingent of evangelicalism that is more confident, less threatened, and more open to things that perhaps in the past it would have found scary?
I don't know. I would like to think that there is, but I don't know the answer to that, John T. I would hope that there is, but the simple answer is I don't know. I think that there is a move in the culture, in the world in which we live, to either retrench and to almost really, really hunker down and to dig it back into that sort of beleaguered sense of we're right and you're wrong. That's slightly death dealing, and it's definitely the irony is, I guess, and you guys will know this far better than I, is that the irony is that the parts of the church that seem to be growing still and seem to be numerically growing anyway are sort of those very, very sure churches that are fundamental in the sense that they know right from wrong. And the sort of model, if there was such a thing as a Greenbelt church, for instance, which there's sort of not, those are the churches that are dying and shrinking and shriveling up. So that's what I guess we're wrestling with as people of faith is where's our community going? And we have the privilege of being able to play for one weekend a year. We haven't got the pastoral responsibility that goes with trying to nurture and look after a group of people and grow them and sustain them and help them and equip them in that sense. So we've got an easy job, really, compared to church leaders who are trying to do something different or give people different angles. And I always think of Greenbelt as the kind of new Reformation church, but I guess, as you say, it's not a church. It's a much more short-term, momentary thing. But then there seems to be a growing number, particularly, and there's always this disconnect between leaders and pew fillers who, in terms of ideology and philosophy and theology, but there does seem to be a growing number of people who are coming around to what I would call a Greenbelt way of thinking, whether it's deconstructing their evangelicalism or their fundamentalism, or just being more inclusive or being more confident and secure in their faith. Do you think that there would ever come a time where this momentary ephemeral space of Greenbelt could be used
to help them in their year-long journeys? And then does that take you into the space of being one of those programmatic Christian festivals again, where there'll be a teaching stream of like how we implement this?
Yeah. I mean, that's how long have we got? That would take a few podcasts, but that's one of the things we're wrestling with and thinking about at the moment is how Greenbelt sort of, in a sense, re-engages with the church as it sort of dies in the UK. Not across the board, but in the mainstream recognizable or long-term established recognizable ways. I think there's a job of work for us to do. We've playfully thought about the idea of, churches applying for some sort of Greenbelt kite mark. That sounds so horribly arrogant, as if we could sort of give a stamp of approval to communities that are really Christian.
You could instead do like that explicit lyrics thing they used to put on albums in the 90s, which I always saw as the mark of quality. It's just like a warning label.
A warning, a Greenbelt advisory to people before they came in. So, but we're genuinely thinking, how can we form links with churches? Can there be sort of like, without becoming new wine, can there be something which, lots of networks like Inclusive Church and other parachurch organizations are doing great work, and the Heart Edge network out of St. Martin in the Fields, etc. But in a sense, the privilege of being Greenbelt is we've got such wide-ranging network potentials. We've got very little capacity to do anything with that. All of what we do is so funneled in and absolutely swallowed up by just doing those 4 days in August. It would be really difficult to do more with it, but theoretically, I reckon there is potential there. And it wouldn't be, the thing is, you wouldn't want to get into sort of like a franchise type, model whereby you just stamped a certain shape that you wanted everything to be, and it had to be a little bit like Greenbelt in the Field. You'd want it to be really incarnational and enculturated, and you'd want it to be local, and you'd want it to be particular, etc., etc. So the nuance of all that is frightening, but the theory of it is incredibly attractive.
And hey, that shape that then you let people do what they want, it worked for the Baptists. Just speaking as a Baptist, I mean, I say it worked. What we need is a pope. That's what the Baptists need. But what you guys need is a billionaire to just give you loads of money so that you can have the staff and capacity to do this kind of stuff. So if there are any progressive Christian billionaires out there who would like to gift some money to Greenbelt so that they can change the world, I'm sure you're listening to this podcast because, you've given stuff to, they have not. No one's listening to our podcast. Nobody with money is listening to our podcast. That's a shame. Okay, I would like to change tack slightly and talk about you specifically, because I discovered recently that you are a rock star, and not just a rock star in the sense of being, the creative director of Greenbelt, but like an actual freaking rock star that we've got on the podcast right now. And I just wanted to ask you, how does it feel to be one of the beautiful people?
I quite genuinely find it laughable that anyone would think of me as a rock star. I certainly don't think of myself that way. If I was a rock star, I was a very reluctant one. I was the singer-songwriter in a band, and I'm still friends with all that band, and I loved the time that we had together. But it was sort of something that we almost fell into by accident, or being youth group members and going on a very interesting journey in a short space of time, within which we pretty much deconstructed everything that we thought was true, and then reconstructed it, and then decided to stop. But it's very kind of you to say, and I don't often think about that, but our drummer was 50 years old 2 weeks ago, and we had a get together, and those were amazing times. I loved them, and it was, please feel free to ask questions about them, but I'm not a rock star.
So for the Eden Burning fans in our listenership, I mean,
one of you,
like super fan and friend of the show, Kenny.
Oh, Kenny.
I said, we've got Paul Northup on, and he went, from Eden's Burning.
Like, that's his number one frame of reference for you. It's like, not the Eden's Burning guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember Kenny with much fondness. Yeah.
Awesome.
We had an amazing journey. I mean, there's been a lot of talk of the word Baptist. We grew up in a little Baptist chapel all together, a youth group. Started playing instruments because we thought that was a really good tool for our evangelism. Formed one of the typical archetypal Christian bands that play locally and sing songs about how everyone needs to become a Christian. And started off like that. And don't get me wrong, we were pretty committed to that. We really thought that was a good way of sharing our faith. And I think it was over time we realized that actually the craft of what we were doing had a value in and of itself. And also we became increasingly distrusted by the church out of which we were growing, which initially was incredibly supportive, and then just scratched their heads and couldn't work out who on earth we were becoming or what on earth we were doing. And we went on a journey, I think, from playing exclusively in churches and at Christian events to, by the end, playing pretty much exclusively in pubs and clubs and on the live music scene, and having a proper agent and being part of the mainstream music scene. But as we saw it in those days, being salt and light, and, hoping that the stuff that we were doing stood up in its own right, and which I think it did towards the end. It took a long time to get there, and people were extremely kind and came to gigs while we were very genuinely rubbish, and seemed to enjoy it. And again, we seemed to make a little community of people. We made friends along the way. We learnt loads, and at all times we were just trying to be incredibly honest about who we were. And in the songs that I was writing, I was trying to be incredibly honest about the things we were feeling about faith and the way that it did or didn't work in the world. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about your kind of Greenbelt journey, about understanding that you can read truth in the Bible, but also read truth in a novel, and kind of reconciling those two truths and loves. Do you think you felt part of your journey as like a musician? Do you think that really came into that? And how did that come into that? If you
definitely, I think you're right to ask that. So I mean, I went from a youth group member shortly, about a year before going to my first Greenbelt. I had destroyed all my Nick Drake albums because the teaching that was prevalent in our youth group was that if you're listening to stuff which, Nick Drake, I would say is probably my favorite singer-songwriter, but obviously
this is an audio podcast, so people can't see the pain on Jonty's face right now.
Sorry.
It's not exactly Slayer, though, is it? Nick Drake.
Yeah. Exactly. Not exactly Slayer, but because he obviously met with an extreme, it's painful to talk about, but he was a tortured soul in many ways, as are many great artists, etc. Did he commit suicide? Was it an accident? We'll never know. A bit like Jeff Buckley, whatever. A lot of these singer-songwriters who I absolutely love, who speak to me very deeply in a way that very few preachers ever have. I came out of a Christian culture that told me that it was wrong to listen to that sort of stuff because it was drawing you into a melancholy that belonged to the dark side. For want of a it's dividing the world, black and white, evil and good, etc., etc. So to come from that background and then to have the privilege of being part of a band and be friends with people who could be honest with each other, who could have the time to develop what we were doing and to figure out that actually you're allowed to be honest about pain and hurt as well as joy, and write material about that and share it. And that being an artist is about reflecting the world which you see, the experiences you have, in the hope that might resonate with people, was a bit of a journey, and a bit of a Greenbelt journey. And well, it sort of prefigured. It's the embarrassment I have, if I can really be honest, is that I would never. Well, that's not true. That's putting it too strongly. I would struggle to book Eden Burning for Greenbelt. That's that. If I'm really being honest, because certainly in our early,
a reunion tour, it's gonna happen. You can do what you want now.
Surely we're 50 next year. You're
the king. Come on.
Yeah, man, you can do it.
Yeah, nepotism be damned. I'm there. Yeah, because I think in the early days we were such a proselytizing sort of propagandist outfit. It was ridiculous. I think the later Eden Burning could come to Greenbelt and do all right. So there we go. I'm waffling. I feel slightly embarrassed.
They could be the backing band for Richard Dawkins as he talks. I think that would be amazing. Handing out tracts. That would be like... that brings me to a question that I've had about the kind of the evolution of the music that gets programmed at Greenbelt. Because I'll be honest, when I first went to Greenbelt, I didn't really know what it was. And I remember seeing the Proclaimers and thinking, and a whole bunch of other kind of like secular acts. And I wrote what was an admittedly funny, but quite unkind article for the Baptist Times going like, what? Why? There's so many great Christian bands that have nowhere to play. You guys are chill. You could let them play. Why aren't they playing here? And I guess helping people who aren't familiar with Greenbelt, or even who have, like, how has the programming of music evolved from kind of, the more kind of proselytizing, or, you've had very worshipy bands and stuff on there right through to now where that doesn't seem to be as much of a thing?
Very good question. I think that in terms of the music programming, it's an interesting journey, because at the same time as there's Greenbelt thinking about what it does or doesn't program, there's the CCM music scene in the UK as far as it does or doesn't exist. And there was no doubt that it had a bit of a boom in the 1990s, pretty much spearheaded and in the end and topped out by Delirious, who pretty much swallowed it whole. There's no so bitterness. True. There's no bitterness or resentment there at all. No, quite genuinely. Martin Smith is a friend. It's difficult. It's difficult. I think that in terms of its music programming, Greenbelt is increasingly looked to. Again, this is going to sound as if we're sort of like some sort of we've got some sort of prophetic wine nose that is highly sophisticated, and we know where to smell the spirit where others don't. But I think we're committed to trying to seek out musical artistry in the mainstream wherever we think that there are traces of the kingdom at play within the work, whether or not the artist recognizes it or not. That sounds extremely elusive and highfalutin, but I think
it checks out as a punter. That checks out is you can be like, oh yeah, they got these guys on because they get it in some way.
Yes.
You very rarely see an artist who would be. You're not going to get Marilyn Manson playing there just because the vibe is off.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we get it better than others. But like, for instance, we've got K Tempest headlining on Saturday night at the festival this year. We've wanted to bring Kay, formerly Kate, to the festival from very, very many years, way back when Kate was just a spoken word artist and now a really, really sort of growing global phenomenon. And in Kay's work, we feel like we recognize the yearnings that we want to platform and spotlight. So, and we feel them. We feel there's such a quality and a depth and an integrity in Kay's work that, as an ambitious arts festival that wants to be credible in that sense, why wouldn't we want to platform Kay over and above Eden Burning?
Whoa, not Eden Burning. Whoa, those guys are national treasures. You shut your mouth. No, but that makes total sense. Although one of my favorite moments of any live gig, but particularly at Greenbelt, was you had someone programmed who was doing, I think, a children's gig, but he was drinking beer and he did swear and he was doing the most bizarre stuff. And I just remember the press tent people looking very worried in it and me just going, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. It was incredible. And I can't remember who the artist was, but he did a whole bunch of like vegan stuff and like, don't eat your friends, the animals are your friends. And then, and he was chugging Budweiser and he kept on swearing and going, sorry, and just increasingly anxious parents pulling their children away. And it was wonderful. I think he may not have passed the vibe check, but like he's still.
Yeah, we do have moments like that at Greenbelt each year where we do get it a little bit wrong. Similarly to what I'm trying to recall the name of the artist, but I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about, Jonty. But in 2019, we had the comedian Tony Law, who came to us on Monday afternoon to play what we had explicitly told him was going to be to a family audience. He was fresh off the back of doing 3 weeks at Edinburgh. He came, he was absolutely off his head with tiredness, and he dropped not just the F-bomb, but the C-bomb. He dropped everything from moment one onwards. Word. I was getting radio messages. I had to run across there. I jumped on stage as soon as he'd finished. I sort of apologized to the audience for having got it wrong, and I got the best heckle that I've ever had in my life from the audience. Someone just said, "Fuck off." So I was feeling extremely sheepish and neurotic, and as Greenbelt sort of gave it back to me and said, "Look, don't worry, we're adult enough to know what's gone on here."
That is so beautifully Greenbelt, though.
And that's also a great reason for not going home early, because I think I did. I love Tony Law, and it sounds very Tony Law.
It was so Tony Law. It was peak Tony.
We have to wrap up now, but how stressful is it, and what is it like to be in your shoes? Because we're all punters. We'll have, like any festival, there'll be stuff that annoys you, or you have frustrations, but most of the time you're actually just having a wonderful time swanning about, and you're suffering. What is that like?
Oh, well, I mean, we're all grown-ups on the podcast. We all belong to organizations where we've done things like Myers-Briggs tests, or, perhaps if we're a little bit more Greenbelt, we've done the Enneagram, and
or your horoscope, whatever.
Oh yeah, or your horoscope. In other words, we come to know ourselves more as we grow older, hopefully. I know myself now that I'm completely unsuited to my role. And I shouldn't be doing it when it comes to this time of year. I've got completely the wrong personality type, and I'm resigned to the fact that makes these few weeks absolute hell. Particularly at the festival, it's absolutely hellish.
Oh no!
It's lonely, it's stressful. Now, I don't say that for any sympathy. I just say that because that's the way it is. I love the planning. I love the booking. I love the creativity. I love the thinking. I love the curation. I hate the delivery. Others in the team absolutely come alive at this time of year. They're like so alive. It's incredible. I do a lot of running, and they're like the people on the start line who are absolutely going to beast you and just run a PB. They're just like coiled. Whereas I'm wanting to really just go and hide under a rock and go back to bed. I suffer from option paralysis. You need to make decisions super quick. I'm a slow processor. It takes me a couple of years to think about something serious. So I am completely unsuited to it. So this time of year is singularly horrid. But there will be moments when I look at what's happening at Greenbelt and I will cry, partly because I'm exhausted. But partly because I think, yes, it was worth it, and I still believe in this. But no, this little bit of fire is not something I enjoy. But do not feel sorry for me at all, because I do greatly enjoy being part of Greenbelt. But the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs has taught me that really I am in the wrong job.
I feel like this is not a time to tell people to not feel sorry for you. I feel like this is a time to pitch to our listeners. If you're at Greenbelt and you see Paul looking stressed, just buy him a beer. I feel like
or indeed a bottle of Yellowtail, or what is it called?
Yellowtail.
Let's get some Malbec. Yeah.
That might be a bad idea though, because that might tip me over the edge.
It could change everything for you though. If it's just like in future years, Paul's the drunk one. He's very chill these days.
He's just jumping on stage after comedians. And just,
I'll just elbow Giles Fraser aside and said, I'm doing this.
How you like me now, bitch? Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's
just weeping on stage. Why did you say no to me, Richard? What did I do?
Okay, so you have to buy a drink for Paul if you see him at the festival. That's the important thing. Okay.
I'll buy you all drinks.
Well, that's fantastic. Do you have any final words to say to the Beer Christianity audience, just about Greenbelt, about what you guys do?
Not really, other than the fact that I wish I knew more who the beer Christianity community and audience are, but I have a sense I have a sense that you're Greenbelt type people, and I would say don't let anything go. Don't believe anything. Believe something, and believe it really, really wholeheartedly and passionately, but don't suffer any shit.
Excellent. We'll put that on the t-shirts.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, especially at this time that we now know you hate.
This has been really enjoyable in a hateful time. Thank you.
A hateful time. That's good. Hey,
Wonderful.
Wonderful. That can go on our review thing as well. Really enjoyable in a hateful time. Paul, thank you so much. If you want to hear more of Beer Christianity, you can go to beerchristianity.libsyn.com. Is it? Yeah, it is. It's beerchristianity.libsyn.com. You can get, is it not? Laura's like, that's the wrong address.
Oh, I had no idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
I never
happens. Yes.
When we record once every 4 months.
We weren't better when we were recording every week, though, to be fair. Anyway, you can Google Beer Christianity podcast. That's fine. And there's a newsletter, and you can send us voice notes, though only like one person ever has. You can email us beerchristianity@yahoo.com because we're old like that. Any of that stuff. You can find us. And do go to Greenbelt. Where can people find out more about Greenbelt, Paul?
Greenbelt.org.uk.
Fantastic. And what's the one thing you're looking forward to most at Greenbelt?
K-Tempest.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.